Hello and welcome to another edition of Buckeye Banter. Well, we tell the stories of Ohio State athletes and folks who work around Ohio State athletics. And today I'm so excited to bring in a four-year letterman at Ohio State at receiver, Dane Sanzenbacher. Dane, thanks so much for taking some time.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. This will be fun.
I got two things before we tell your story. Number one, did you see the Jon Gruden video of him unearthing all these stuff Ohio State sent him?
Yeah. So I don't have Twitter, but my wife sent me the link, and then over the past couple of days, multiple people have sent it to me. Like, check out the 140 mark of this video.
Yeah.
I don't
he
know
was
what it
listing
is.
all these Ohio State greats, and boom, he was so
Mhm.
excited because knowing I don't know Mike Tirico, but I know like I went to broadcast school, so I know a guy like him is so focused on enunciation and things like
Yeah,
that, and so Gruden was basically mocking Tirico's pronunciation of your name.
yeah. That's what everybody sent it to me. I was like, wow, he really he threw me on a heck of a list there, just randomly
Yeah,
flexing his Ohio State knowledge. He's always been a big fan for whatever reason.
mm-hmm.
He did something very similar back in 2011 during his quarterback camp when he had Terrell on,
Okay.
and he made half of the whole show about me, and I'm sitting home, I'm watching it live on SportsCenter just by myself in my apartment, just eating breakfast.
Yeah.
I'm like, what is going on here? So I've never met him, but yeah, he's brought me up a couple of times in the media. I actually played for. Well, his brother Jay was the offensive coordinator in Cincinnati when I was there.
Yeah.
So, and he called a couple of our games, but I've never met him. I've never met him in person, but I appreciate every once in a while. It seems like now every 10 years he throws me a shout out in some media bit.
Well, he went real deep in that video. I mean, the knowledge of all the players, certainly. I mean, he's from Ohio. He played at University of Dayton. But the knowledge of all the players and then the fight song and the tradition and the coaches. I mean, that I think if I'm Ohio State, I put that on recruiting loops, throughout the Woody Hayes. I mean,
I
that was
think based on the views that thing saw last I checked, it was like in the hundreds, thousands. I think it's on its own recruiting loop right now.
and I got to tell you, if I could get even a few items out of that box, I mean, that was some really good stuff that Ohio State sent.
That's all part of the recruiting. You send the box to he's an influence. I mean, he's a football influencer.
He is. He is.
So, I mean,
So,
you get him to open that stuff. It's really cool.
well, you mentioned being listed among some greats, Chris Carter, David Boston. He talked about more recent guys, but
Seth, you don't put me on that list. What are you saying?
no, I'm getting down. I'm getting to it, man. So when you play in the NFL, so you belong on that list, absolutely. But I wanted your take a little bit on kind of this last X amount of years since Coach Hartline, whom was on the team there when you joined Ohio State's roster. What are your thoughts on this run of receivers at Ohio State, and kind of what's your take on that side of it overall?
Yeah, it's been an unreal decade now.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a little bit more. I think it's on some level the rich are getting richer because once you have that stable and you've shown guys can go first round, like back to the Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, things were really starting to ramp up to this being like, oh, there's an expectation now for the receivers at Ohio State to be first rounders, and then it makes recruiting a whole lot easier to get those guys in. So I think that's part of it. I think part of it is the stability that the coaching staff's had. I think that you've had Hartline there for so long. Coach Day has done a great job of bringing former guys on staff. You've had Laurinaitis there, and even Coach Day has been there for a while now. So I think that's in the recruiting game, and especially now in college football, that consistency goes a long way. If you can say, like, here are these same coaches, the same guys that got X, Y, and Z receivers to the NFL and are, stars on some level in the NFL. If you're a top recruit at that position, if you're a top recruit, a top wide receiver recruit right now, Ohio State has to be on your short list. You might not get them all.
Sure.
But your goal is probably to go to the NFL, and you've seen a proven formula that they can get there. And it's not changing anytime soon. We've got another couple guys in the pipeline still that could have been first rounders this year. I mean, Jeremiah could have gone.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, maybe 1 or 2 overall as a freshman. You know, I see Chris Olave, kind of a 3-star recruit. The story's awesome how Coach Day was out there looking at a quarterback, and all of a sudden he kind of stumbled on Olave and brought him in. And he's almost like the proof is in the pudding, as you were saying, because you get a 3-star guy like him, he turns into this great All-American type receiver, and then all of a sudden you're bringing in 5 stars. Do you have a favorite receiver of the last decade or so?
I was always a Garrett Wilson guy
Mm-hmm.
in that like NSYNC Backstreet Boys competition that was Olave and Garrett Wilson. That said, I probably identify more with Chris Olave. And what I hope is that like that everybody loves that story, and I do too. I mean, I was a 3-star guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, he played special teams, like kind of worked his way into then being this threat and then first-round pick, and then shows he can do it at the next level. I hope that doesn't go away, because it seems like as we get more specialized and there's that expectation, there's less of an incentive for coaches to take a shot on 3-star guys that might be either culture guys or fit what you're trying to do.
Right.
Because there's and no knock on them, there's so much pressure to have the top recruiting class. And those times have changed. I mean, if you look at the Ohio State class now, it's like it's among the top recruits in the nation. Whereas even when I was there, which seems like a long time ago now, but relatively not that long, it was always a sprinkle of guys. Like you had Ohio guys that were, 3 stars, guys that were going to be, you were trying to build this mix of guys. Of course, we had a couple that were like, this guy's one of the top recruits in the country, the Beanie Wells of the world, and Teddy. But some of the other guys were just guys. I mean, Troy Smith, I don't think was like a number 1 recruit. I mean, a lot of those really good players, they were just kind of made their way in. So I think, Chris Olave stands out in that sense that might not have been on your radar in the freshman recruiting class, and kind of made his way through. So I've been a fan of a lot of them. It's tough to pick favorites. They're all incredibly impressive. But that's one thing I hope that is able to hang on, at least on some level, among all of the changes that are happening, that there still is space for coaches to say, you know what, I like that guy. And I'm going to take him because I like him, not because a recruiting service said he is X, Y, or Z or this many stars.
Yeah, I remember the story of like Coach Fickle standing on a table for Darren Lee, right? I mean, undersized, hadn't really played linebacker before, but he became a key cog. Well, let's tell your story. You were born October 13th, 1988 in Maumee, Ohio, right? So you go
actually in Toledo. I don't know.
Born in Toledo?
Yeah, I don't know where. Well, it's very close to Maumee.
Okay.
But no, I grew up and lived in Toledo. You know where I think that started? Back in the day, when NCAA football was still making their game, but had to like kind of make it squint so you weren't quite exactly that person because they couldn't pay you or didn't want to pay you. Everybody's hometown was like slightly off. Okay. It was like one town over. So I think that's why mine became like Maumee, Ohio. And then I saw it popping up. I was like, I never lived or was born in Maumee. I was born in St. Vincent, so it's just downtown Toledo, and lived in Toledo until college.
Let's get that right then. I interviewed Kent Merker. He's a Dublin native, pitched in the major leagues, threw a no-hitter for the Braves, pitched for the Reds. His baseball reference says that he attended Otterbein. And when I asked him, I was like, I don't remember you attending Otterbein. What's that all about? And he's like, I have no idea. He's like, I heard somebody put that on there trying to get some attention for the school and the baseball program there. He's like, but I never went there. So you can't believe everything on the internet. So Wikipedia got me there. You did attend Central Catholic High School.
That is fact. That's correct.
Tell me a little bit about growing up there in Northwest Ohio, though, and then we'll get into your career there at Central Catholic.
Yeah, I can only look back at it now, obviously, from the shoes I'm in, and especially from like now living in Columbus. through the lens of like where Ohio State fit into that. But this was like Northwest Ohio, even at the time, was not like a sports hub or mecca for like talent to come out of. We had some guys, but you knew who the guys were. Like Jimmy Jackson was out of Toledo. Like there was a few guys that were like world beaters, but I don't know. It was just a very normal, Ohio growing up childhood. I mean, I didn't have it. There was not a big emphasis on sports in my life. There was just the normal. You play on your middle school team. You go on and you try to make the high school team. But yeah, I grew up in South Toledo. Played casual sports with my friends. Never did like really specializing in one or the other or travel or anything like that. Which I guess that kind of childhood, it was more of the norm back then for guys that make it to this level. But it did make the ride from then until now, or at least through my playing career, all the more crazy.
Yeah.
Because you're like, oh, this wasn't in the cards, or even anybody I know, much less related to, but anybody I know has had an experience like this.
You mentioned Toledo is in Ohio. We understand that. Did you grow up enjoying Ohio State football? Was that kind of a thing that you looked at, or was it a little more out of sight, out of mind when you were
casually? Yeah, I wasn't like I didn't know the roster. I don't know as many players as Jon Gruden does. And I knew it, but it was probably I would see a couple games a year. One being the Michigan game, because was and is all but a holiday in Toledo.
Sure.
I mean, when I was growing up, it was like you didn't have to be a fan of one or the other, but you had to pick one or the other. Mm-hmm. So like in my picking, I was an Ohio State person, not a Michigan person. But most years growing up, that was probably the only game I watched. And for most people, that was the one that mattered.
Yeah.
So that was most of my exposure to Ohio State, but it was, like I said, that was something in a faraway land. Like Ohio State football was as big as anything else in Michigan. But, that was something that happened in this gigantic looking stadium that just like was beyond the belief. I had never gone. Like I had never been to a game until I was a recruit my junior year of high school. So didn't really know what it was like in person. But it's always been in the periphery of my life until it was in the forefront.
Yeah. Well, hey, at Central Catholic, you played for Greg Dempsey, and we'll get to this in a minute. But I've talked to him 2 consecutive years as I've helped call the state championship games against Waterston, and I'll tell you, talking to him, A, he represents the school really well, but B, he's as nice as could be. Like, he's one of the most hectic weeks of his career. The week he's about to coach a state championship game, and he's given me a lot of time. He's in the playoffs every year. He's got 5 state titles, including one with you in 2005. Tell me a little bit about playing for him and playing at the school there.
Yeah. So my, I guess my junior year or sophomore year, I played a little bit. Coach Dempsey was only, I think, on his 3rd year at Central Catholic. I can't remember when he started, but it had to have been maybe year 2000.
I think that's right. I looked it up. Yeah.
Yeah. So I got to Central Catholic in 2003. So he was a pretty young coach. And Central was by no means like a powerhouse football program. By some measures, not even all that successful. They I think won 4 games or so his first year. It wasn't there. So we were progressively getting better, made the playoffs my sophomore year when I was playing a little bit. And then my junior year happened and we made this, state playoff run and won the state title. And at that time, it was out of nowhere. You look back at it now and what they've done over the past, decade and more has been very impressive in building that program to now. You don't think about it, but at the time that was St. Francis did it once a few years prior for Northwest Ohio school, but it didn't happen often. So I think that was the turning point. And I think what he's done well, aside from just being a great guy, he's a central guy himself, but he's, similar to what makes the current Ohio State program strong is stability. I mean, he's been there and kept his core guys and staff around him. Like some of his staff I played with, like guys that are there and come back in so they get it. And when you have that, and now you have it's a lot easier to get players to believe. It's like you can see like, okay, now you have this expectation of making a run in the state playoffs, which holds its own pressures. But as far as like a program, getting guys to buy in is a whole lot easier. You get that ball rolling in. I mean, so yeah, I think him being there for that long and having that crew around him helps build that winning culture there. But it's unreal. I mean, and I'm sure you've asked him, you could have asked him, there's no way he would have foreseen this coming. If you had asked him in 2000, like, hey, what do you think this looks like? The success that he's been able to have there. So it's cool for me. I told him recently, I was like, actually I saw him at the state championship, this past one, which we won't talk about that one. We'll talk about.
Oh no, we're going to talk about it.
But I told him there, I was like, it's funny now because I'm living in Columbus and, you're in Central Ohio and people are like, oh, where'd you go to school? Toledo Central Catholic. And they're like, oh man, you guys are a powerhouse. And like, that's the perception now. It's like got statewide respect when at the time that nobody had heard about Toledo Central Catholic in Columbus.
No.
In 2000.
And I remember I was a sports writer covering high school sports from 2001 to 2012 full time. And I remember, like you said, St. Francis. What's the other one? There's another. Is it
St. John's?
St. John's. Yeah, I remember talking about them a lot. And the local Catholic schools would go up and play them sometimes as well. Yep. And didn't know much about you guys. But listen, you didn't just play in a state title game. From what I could tell, you have 3 touchdown catches in a state title game to win a game, right? I mean, that's a great game as a junior.
Yeah, that whole season was it was just one of those weird ones. I mean, most of my career was like I don't know if I would have seen that coming. Mm-hmm. That was the very first year of like, what is going on here? Because I mean, I played a little bit as a sophomore, but my junior year, it like kind of the lid came off.
Yeah,
and it wasn't for any particular reason. To me at the time, plays just started to happen. Like things were just happening. And then all of a sudden you get to late in the season, you're like, oh, okay, I guess I'm one of the leaders of this team. Okay. And then you go in the playoff. And I think I had a heck of a playoff run. I think I'm removed enough now that it doesn't sound like bragging. I think I can just like speak about it frankly. Like
you made all state as a junior off of that run.
Yeah. I mean, it was, our team, we had a really good group of guys and we were all like close. So I think that helped as a whole. And for whatever reason, like the individual plays came to me. I think I had like 11 interceptions and I don't know the touchdown numbers.
That would be 11 interceptions. That in your career, I think I've got you down as 2,808 career receiving yards and 151 overall receptions.
In high school?
Yeah.
Oh.
Does that sound right?
I believe you. Yes.
Well, you're also all state in the 400. So that means you're fast as well. The 400, a high school track coach once told me, and not to be sexist, but he said that's a man's race. That's the 400 is a big, serious race, isn't it?
Yeah, it's funny. When I first got to Ohio State, Butch Reynolds was on staff as our speed coach. Uh-huh. And I was a track guy. So it's like I didn't play baseball in the spring. I was a track guy. And there's like it's a certain kind of people that are track people. And then once you do the sport and you run it, like you like to chat with other people about it. So I was like, I'm a 400 guy. Here's one of the best to ever do it.
Probably.
Like world record holder for a time. Mm-hmm. But I always found like comfort in talking to him, or when he said to me, he's like, Dane, there was never a time that I woke up and felt like running a 400. He's like, there was not. It's just a painful race. I mean, there's no way getting around the you just can't sprint for that long, but you have to try. So that in really that became I worked my way down to that. I actually ran like 800 in mile my freshman year. So like I was not quite sprinter fast, believe it or not, for being like an NFL wide receiver. Like I ran hundreds and 200s, but that wasn't going to be that like explosive off the blocks wasn't going to be my thing. I could sustain long enough and was fast enough. So yeah, I had some success in the 4. Really liked track. I still do. I coached track for a little bit when I was done playing.
Well, tell me about your recruitment. You committed to Ohio State in July of 06, so that's right before your senior season. I saw 2 different services. One of them said you were the number 12 ranked prospect in Ohio at the time. What was getting recruited by Ohio State like at that time, and of course, Coach Tressel being chief among that?
Well, I think some of those recruiting services too, I think they like will retroactively do their I think after I was committed to Ohio State, I went a bunch of numbers.
That happens. That does happen.
It wasn't before because I wasn't really being recruited by Ohio State, to be honest. Coach Tressel's brother's Dick was back when they did recruiting areas. I don't think they do it as much anymore because it's so national, but he was responsible for Northwest Ohio. And he had stopped by the high school and all but told like, like we know he's all state and blah, 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 but I don't see an offer happening here, just so you know. So it was not on my radar whatsoever. How it came about is a story I've told before. I'll keep it as brief as I can. But so yeah, in between my junior and senior year, Coach Ginn, Teddy's dad, who had all the pull in the world at this time in Ohio,
right?
He had his bus tour. I don't know if you remember or heard about this. I don't think he still does it. But essentially, he would charter a bus with like the best players in Cleveland, let's say. A lot of Glenville kids, but there was some St. Ed's kids and like all the best players in the Cleveland area. And because he had so much cachet at the time, would tour around for 2 weeks to about 12 colleges and do like showcase camps. Like basically he's like, here's the talent that we have. I am going to take them to you so you don't have an excuse not to see these guys.
Sure.
So, and he had the access because he had the name in Ohio. So through a connection in Toledo, I randomly was able to get on the bus. I don't know how the friendship happened. It was actually a friend. Coach Ginn was friends with somebody that was a coach at another school. They reached out to me. Long story short, we met him at like the Turnpike stop. The bus stopped and I just got on there and was on it for 2 weeks with nobody I knew. I had a bag of clothes and we're like, okay, we're going to do this. So anyways, we went to about 12, that 2 weeks, we went to 12 or 13 camps essentially.
What other schools was it?
We went to, it was every MAC and Big Ten school within like 3 states, I feel.
Okay.
It was Bowling Green, Ball State, Marshall. We drove all the way out to Iowa.
Wow.
Illinois, Notre Dame. Just like everything that was, we might have gone to Indiana. We went to Cincinnati. It was just, we would just get on the bus, half the time sleep there, stop at a motel. But anyway, so like we did this whole tour and throughout, I think Coach Ginn kind of took a liking to me. I was doing pretty well. But like he kind of took me under his wing.
Yeah.
And so we ended up at Iowa and that was the first Big Ten offer I had. Kirk Ferentz like offered me on the spot there, which that was a shock to me. I had no big offers. I had a couple MAC offers. I think Ball State was like my best offer at the time. So I was like blown away by that. I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to Iowa. How far is that? It's 10 hours. All right, whatever. This is going to be, this is unreal. Our last stop was at Ohio State. We did a little like mini camp, which was barely anything. I mean, Coach Hazel worked us out, but it was not much of a workout at all. Certainly nothing you can make any decisions off of. So I was like, okay, truthfully, it's been 2 weeks. I'm ready to go home.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is the last camp, and my dad was picking me up from there. So ended up after that camp, my coach called me and said, you got invited back to a senior day camp 2 days later at Ohio State. I'm like, okay, great opportunity. I just got off I was just on a bus for 2 weeks doing camps. But I'm like, okay, well, you got invited back to do this one. You should probably take every opportunity you get. So again, went back to this camp 2 days later down in Columbus. There was more work out there. There was one-on-ones and everything, but didn't talk to anybody really directly. I was just like, I think I did okay, but it felt standard to me, and was in the car on my way back home to Toledo and got a text from somebody saying they were Coach Tressel. I didn't have his number.
Yeah.
On my flip phone, texts were like relatively early, I feel like.
Sure. Yeah.
Saying like, hey, Dane, great having you at camp. We have a scholarship for you. Hope you give us a great look. Coach Tress. And I was like, I still remember like the little like rest stop we were at when I got it.
Yeah.
I'm like, look at my dad. I was like, you're not going to believe this. At that point, I only had Iowa, and I just gotten it a couple days before. And before that, it was Ball State, and that was it.
Sure.
So I'm like, okay. So I let it sit for like a couple days, and I ended up calling him to confirm this was actually you.
Yeah.
And then like, this is a real thing, right? And sure enough, he's like, yep. We really like what we see, blah, blah, blah. Would love to have you. I all but committed right there. I mean, I didn't, because I was like, okay, you're supposed to weigh your option. But from that point, I was there. I said I was going to make the story short. It's gotten pretty long.
No, this is
basically how it ended. I didn't find out till years later, till I was done at Ohio State. Coach Tressel told me what had happened. They weren't really recruiting me. They had decided like, okay, we got this room full of this, and we're recruiting X, Y, and Z guys. The bus had stopped there. Coach Ginn had talked to Coach Tressel, and Coach Tress essentially said, who do I need? Because that's the gravitas that Coach Ginn had at the time. That was
the pipeline. Yep.
And Coach Ginn said, him. And I'm sure Coach Tress was like, huh? Like the little guy over there? And he was like, yep. And that was all it took.
Wow.
So, I mean, it's like, I don't think I did anything great at the camps per se. I think they did go back and watch the film and everything, and I had really good tape. But the blessing from Coach Ginn was, I don't want to say the sole, but definitely the number one reason I even ended up at Ohio State, because the recruiting side was kind of not happening. I was going to be in MAC school if not for that.
You always heard the stories, and as a fan or somebody that, even as a reporter, we covered some of Coach Ginn's games and things like Ted Ginn, and they played against Pickering Central. I remember a friend of mine on the staff at the paper I was with, covered it and came back just raving about them. What do you recall any other players on that bus?
Yeah, Nate Oliver was on. The guys that ended up in my class, Nate Oliver was at St. Ed's. Jamel Hines was on it from Glenville. Handful of Glenville guys that didn't end up at Ohio State but went to a couple other places. Kyle Jefferson, who was a wide receiver at Wisconsin.
Yep.
He was one of the top receivers in the state at that time. Glenville kid, had a really good career at Wisconsin. There's a couple quarterbacks. I can't remember where they ended up, but a lot of really good talent. I mean, it was intimidating getting on us and to like randomly compete there, but it was 2 weeks that changed the trajectory of my life. I mean, I wouldn't, if you had to see a turning point where like things weren't even going this direction at all, it was that experience. It was that bus.
Yeah. Well, let's fast forward. You end up going to college. You're at Ohio State. You catch your first college pass as a touchdown from Todd Beckman. What was the transition like? You mentioned earlier that maybe, with not playing the travel sports and things like that, but you hit the ground running. You played right away. What was it like to transition to being an Ohio State Buckeye?
That whole, all I just described through my senior year of high school and through freshman year, really like things didn't slow down.
Yeah.
Because it was, you're done with high school. And at that time, it was just starting to become pretty common for guys to enroll in the summer. So, I mean, I was on campus a week after graduation. something like that. Most guys were in that class. I was in really good shape coming off track.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I put myself in a pretty good position as a freshman to play, to the point where I really played in that opening game because I think Ray Small or somebody was hurt. So I stepped in and I was the number 3 guy because Hartline and Rubisky were the starters.
Mm-hmm.
And it was maybe the second play I ever played. The first play was a play before. We were down on the 5-yard line, and for whatever reason, we're throwing the ball. And yeah, I run my route, and before I knew it, the ball was in the air. I had caught it and scored, and that was just like a further of this whirlwind. Like, what just happened? Like, it wasn't even supposed to play. And that was the first touchdown of the season. That was the first touchdown I had seen in Ohio Stadium live. And it was like my mind just exploded. I'm like, how did that, like, what are we doing here? So yeah, that was how it started. I got to play here and there my freshman year, enough to, put my name out there as like a guy that would be a number 3 or 4 at that time at Ohio State. Yeah, things didn't slow down until probably my sophomore year is when I hit kind of like a, not sophomore slump, I would say, but more of like a steadying rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
And then junior year on, it felt like, okay, I'm a guy, or I need to play like a guy. I need to take ownership of this position and become like a leader here if I'm going to be a starter here or win a starting job and then keep it. So yeah, it had a wild start to it, slowed down, and then ramped up junior and senior year.
Well, listen, we were talking about earlier about the current receiver crop and even going back the last 8 to 10 years, but you're in a situation where you come in with, you mentioned Hartline and Rubisky. They had kind of tutored under Ginn and Gonzalez and Holmes, right? And all these guys. I guess take me through kind of coming in behind them and kind of boom, I'm out there right away with these guys.
Yeah, surreal. It was all you try to just take in as much and learn as much as you can. I think I was lucky in that aspect of when I came in was that how it seemed to work at that time was like you always knew who your top 2 guys were. Like it was, from Santonio on, then it was like Teddy and Anthony Gonzalez and Roy Hall was on the outside, and they kind of made that work. I came in at like the first year of it being Hartline and Rubisky's show. Because this was right off the 06 season. The 1-2 game, we just lost the national championship to Florida, but it was going to be a new quarterback, Todd's first year. Troy was gone, Teddy was gone, Gonzo was gone, Roy was gone. So that was like Hartline Rubisky's year to step in, and I could then be there to supplement that because they were brand new to that role. They weren't starters before that. They made plays, but they weren't the guys. So I think I was fortunate to have that to come in and say like, okay, I can learn from these guys, but it's their show. Nobody's expecting me to come in and be the leader. And was able to have 2 years of that. So I had both of those guys in front of me for 2 years knowing like, okay, I know my role. I know what my role is. They're not expecting me to go be an outside threat or be a number 1 or 2 guy. I'll play in the slot, learn this craft from this position. And I think that really set me up for when they both left for the NFL, having enough knowledge of the position to be able to step in. It's like, okay, now it's your turn.
You were talking a little bit about 08 and your sophomore season and the idea that, like you said, maybe not a sophomore slump, but the whole team kind of had this effect because you go out, Beanie gets hurt, you go out to USC, that's a tough game, you come back. Coach Tressel makes a transition from Beckman. And Beckman, I mean, he did a thing earlier, like he was older. He gray shirted. I mean, he was in the program a long time. And here he was his last season in 08. And they make the move to this amazing talent in Terrell Prior that, the coach Tressel had won the recruiting war over him the previous spring. And I guess, tell me a little bit about dealing with that, because even like I know Rubisky and Hartline at the time, they were used to running routes for this pro-style quarterback, and now you're switching. And that was obviously the scuttlebutt around town, like, oh my goodness, these receivers are upset because now Pryor's running so much and he's not quite as refined as a passer.
Yeah, I mean, these were opposite playing styles. These 2 guys, Todd and Terrell, Yeah, and maybe that's why, statistically, it probably wasn't like a slump for me. It was probably on par, if not better than my freshman year. But maybe it felt like that because it was a transition year. It felt like, okay, like once the decision was made, we knew once Terrell was in the building, like this is a big recruit and he's going to have a big opportunity to be next. And we won a ton of games. I mean, we were competitive still. I mean, it's not like it was we were still a really good team, but it did feel like after that USC game, this was the time when like national championship was on your radar, but it wasn't like number one goal because only 2 people got to do it. And you kind of lucked into it if you got in the game.
Well, even 07, you had teams lose after the Illinois loss.
We probably didn't deserve to be in it, but I mean, I should say deserve. We won the games we were supposed to win and had a good enough record. But yeah, it wasn't like the system wasn't refined enough for that to be like, okay, we just need to do this. You needed to catch some breaks. So it felt like once we went out and played USC and lost pretty handily, it was like that was a litmus test of like where we're at as a program right now amongst the best, the national brands of football. And USC was really, really good that year. So yeah, I remember we made the switch. I remember we just kind of rolled with it. The coaches did not make a big announcement from what I remember or heard through the grapevine. It was just like they went into the quarterback room, told them this is what we're doing, and everybody kind of moved on. And that was it was weird the first couple games. But I don't remember there being, there were some grumblings with the older guys, but there wasn't like a revolt. I think we kind of knew like we've got jobs to do. These guys are making their decisions. I know we had to adjust as a receiving core. I mean, I know that was a discussion was like, hey, you need to be ready for him to run. This might be like he's going to read once and then he's going to try to make a play. So make yourself available, which I think on some level, Hartline and Rubisky benefited from. Yeah. I mean, they helped him out a ton, but once you got used to that style, both of those guys were really good at playing that game, playing that like get back open, make a play.
Sure.
So yeah, it was a huge transition for everybody. We still ended up in a BCS game. We lost to Texas in the Fiesta Bowl, but still a really good team, grew a lot. And I think like, yeah, that next year we were a very, very good team. And I think that's probably largely because like Terrell had the experience the year before to actually get into the fire. And while he was not perfect, ran a ton, he made a ton of plays too. I mean, he grew a lot as a quarterback.
Can you describe him as an athlete, even as a freshman? Like what? Because I mean, even the Penn State game in 08, he kind of had the ball punched out there on a bit of an option type play, and that sealed the loss. But just a play every time he touched the ball, it felt like it could happen. Like he could make a lot of plays. What was he like right when he walked in the building as an athlete?
Well, we kind of watched the circus too, because we were all there already for the recruiting stuff. So, I mean, the big news to us was like, okay, this guy is the first guy to kind of blow through the recruiting deadline and say like, nope, that doesn't work for me. I'm going to go a little bit later. And so like we were seeing it all on ESPN. We're like, okay, and then we found out we got him. We're like, okay, all right, cool. And then he gets there and you're like, he's enormous and runs a 4.4. I mean, he was one of the best athletes on the team every year he was on our team, like without question, and goes on to be a better receiver in the NFL.
Sure.
Than a lot of the guys that were receivers for him in college.
That's true.
Including maybe me. I mean, you look at the NFL, he ended up being, my quarterback was probably a better receiver than me in the NFL, at the NFL level. So freak athlete. And I think those early mistakes, and you still see this with quarterbacks that have a huge playmaking upside, you make so many plays that, as a teammate and or as a fan, you end up giving more grace to the mistakes, like the ball getting punched out at Penn State. Like, yeah, we're like, that's like a young mistake. That's a freshman deal. I think it was a quarterback sneak, and he just tried to go around the outside and wasn't taking care of it.
You're right.
Got punched out. Yeah. And so it's like, yeah, you don't want to see that, but you're like, man, some of the other stuff that you've pulled off, you get a lot of grace. I feel like when you have that much upside.
Yeah, because some of the plays weren't going to be made, and if Beanie Wells is hurt and things like that, and I mean, he made those plays. I talked to Brian Roll for the last episode, and we talked about. I just was always amazed. Terrell had the long legs, and he would go to the outside so much, and then when Braxton came in, probably almost as fast, if not, right at their speed wise. Braxton though ran up the middle more. Like it just was always fascinating to watch Terrell run around that corner, and you'd see defensive backs think, "I got him." And no, you can't. He would turn the corner on him so easily, wouldn't he?
Yeah, no, that's probably just a comfort level. I think, those guys naturally just took different paths. I think Braxton was always like comfortable being all surrounded by people, like with like the spin moves or whatever it was, felt more comfortable in there. Whereas Terrell's like, he knew he had, gazelle speed if he got to the outside. And so was just more comfortable outrunning everybody. But yeah, that was the start of a run of like, that style of quarterback at Ohio State, because I think that was even different than Troy. I mean, Troy was not the same as Terrell. I mean, Troy was more, he made plays, but was more of a pocket passer than Terrell was, and then Braxton became, and then like kind of how things progressed. But yeah, I think I benefited greatly from having a guy like Terrell at quarterback.
Well,
I think it would have been fine, and just as what's that?
Oh, I'm sorry, you broke up just a little bit. In 2009, you had 36 catches for 570 yards. That's that kind of a step forward. You had a long touchdown catch against Navy. I saw you caught a touchdown pass from DeVere Posey? Was that right? Was there a kind of a trick play there against New Mexico State?
Yeah, we ran a reverse pass. Yeah. Every once in a while, Tress would throw one in there. It was usually not in high stakes games. I mean, this was New Mexico, so I mean, I think the trick there was that DeVere's a lefty, and you might not know that as a receiver. So, and he could throw the ball really well. So when you see a reverse coming to that side, your first thought is not this guy's going to throw it. If you don't know he's a lefty, like if it's coming back to the left, you're like, this is clearly not a reverse pass. So I think that was the idea. In practice, it was covered. Or in reality, in the game, they did not bite at all. Yeah. It was covered, but DeVere threw it anyway, and I just made the play in the end zone.
Awesome.
So yeah, I do have one reception from him. It was a rarity that we did stuff like that. But it was a fun one, memorable.
Well, you make the Rose Bowl that year, and I believe, that has to be a career highlight for you to be able to play in the Rose Bowl. First of all, born and raised in Big Ten country. You had 9 catches for 64 yards, though. That was quite a game against Oregon.
That was another one of those slightly I wouldn't even say uncharacteristic. I feel like Coach Tress gets or that era of football gets pegged as the Tressel era, that it was just like very conservative, and we would just, run the ball, then throw it. I think as a whole, yeah, he played to win games and didn't need to win by a huge margin. So that was frustrating. But when the time came, like, I think we threw the ball in that game the first 13 plays or something. I mean, I think when the time called for it and they saw something on film, they committed to it, and they're like, we don't need to stick to our run on first down, run on second, try to throw for it on third. I mean, we came out, and I don't even know if that was the game plan all week. We knew we had a mix of things in, but the coaches just, when it came to game time, every play that was getting called in was a pass play. So I don't think I had huge yardage, but I think they must have seen there's a lot of opportunity for short stuff underneath. I think I caught like 4 or 5 slants. And I think that was probably the most, number of catch wise, the most I had in a game. but yeah, Rose Bowl, unreal experience. I would still put that up there as like my most memorable game, just because of what the place means and looks like and feels like. And yeah, that also was probably the first time that year we had focused on the passing game as heavily, was in our bowl game. And so DeVere and I, that was kind of our springboard into the next year. That was like a really good way to end that year before we knew we were both going to be there next year as the 1-2 guys. So like that was a nice like cap to that one that kind of kicked off the next year for us. But all-time memorable game. That's one that all these years later, when asked, I always point to that one as probably my most memorable game.
And Coach Tressel had a way about him too. Like it felt like whenever the Buckeyes came up against a flashy new thing, like I remember the 05, the Notre Dame game, Charlie Weiss was the focal point and Coach Tressel brought it to him. You guys go against Oregon, a flashy, newer style of offense and things like that. And then you throw it, like you said, maybe the first 13 times. Your roommate, Brandon Sane, had was that a wheel route or something like that there on the sideline in that game? Just a beautiful play as well. Just very memorable. Jake Ballard with the huge catch, right? With the sunset behind him.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Your career at that point, you've been in 3 BCS bowls, and you're kind of in the national title picture, as you said, maybe knocked out of a little bit by USC, but it kind of makes you wonder what would a playoff have looked like in those 3 or 4 years, right? I mean, might have been something.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure everybody that was on those teams thinks about that now, because every one of them, we would have been in the hunt. You'd at least have a chance, right?
That's what, yeah.
And so I think like you don't know, and I think that the system is getting better and better, is more to getting like giving those teams that are getting hot late a real chance. But like I said, even at that time, it's the Rose Bowl was a gem. It's not, I don't think anybody felt like, well, because we're not in the national championship game, this season was like not a success. So what you gain with the playoff, yes, but you're going to have to lose your last game if you're in it. Only one team gets to like win their last one, which is the nature of playoffs in most sports, and it's what college basketball has. But there's also, that's a bigger shift to what the focus of programs are, because we would have seen that as, I think we lost one game that year. We went to the Rose Bowl and won the Rose Bowl, and that was like a huge celebration. It's like we felt like we had. So yeah, and in this year, in this world, like I should say, we probably enjoyed that Rose Bowl more than this past year's team did.
Wow.
Because you can't
yeah, because you're moving on to the next thing.
Well, yeah, you saw the post-game interviews. That's what they were supposed to do. It's just like, we won that game. It's great, but we've got 3 more. You can't fully take in and enjoy and celebrate something like that if you've got a game after it.
That's true.
That's the nature of bowl games. Bowl games are always, it's the last game.
Right.
You're going to celebrate the bowl game, but now you have like 4 bowl games if you're going to win the national championship. So it's hard. You can't like embrace them all. Now, they got the best one. So, I mean, like, you go and win the national championship, obviously that's the one you want.
Yeah.
So I'm sure they're not worried about like, man, we wish we would have loved that, enjoyed that Rose Bowl more. But
that's true.
It's just a change. But yeah, at that will always be top there on my my memories. But then, again, the next year we had a really good team. I mean, that was a team probably.
Yeah, let me frame that, because if we could erase our memories of what happened at the end of December, beginning of January with the news that came out and all the distractions, that you did go ahead and win the game against Arkansas. We'll get to that. But going into that year, what were your thoughts of how good the team could be? Because as it turned out, your only loss was at Wisconsin. You're right. It's just we're so clouded by the story, right, that happened at the end that we'll get to. But going into it, and as you go through it up until that Wisconsin game, where were you guys as a team?
That was probably the best team I felt like I was on. Like we knew going into that year, because we had just come off winning the Rose Bowl, beating a good Oregon team, who was among the top programs, and we had everybody coming back. I mean, everybody that, for the most part, that contributed in that game would be back the next year. There were some key pieces that wouldn't, some guys on defense, of course, that you had to fill those spots. But I don't know what our preseason ranking was. You're so laser focused that I don't remember thinking about it all that much. But we knew we were going to be good. Mm-hmm. And even I think at Wisconsin, we had just gotten the number 1 ranking. Like that week before.
Yep, that's true.
We lost that game. Notoriously tough place to play. I always blame myself on that one because I lost the coin toss and they ran the opening kickoff back for a touchdown and set the tone.
Yeah.
I was terrible at coin tosses. I don't even know if I won one. But yeah, that was one of the better teams. That's one of those. You lost a game at Wisconsin in a really hard environment, and that was the only game you lost. And then went down and, the game score-wise ended up closer than it should have been against Arkansas. I mean, we dominated that first half, and it wasn't even close, and kind of let them back in to a point that was like scary, and we had to save ourselves. But yeah, that was a very, very good team. Obviously, the year, got clouded with all the outside stuff, but even in a 4-team era, I think we would have had a really good shot. Yeah. And I think we were, if not the best, among, I don't even remember who ended up winning here, but among the best teams in the country.
Yeah, I'm blanking on it as well. But listen, tell me a little bit about the evolution of Terrell Prior from freshman to that year, because the real shame, you mentioned him playing receiver in the NFL. The real shame is he didn't get a 4th year as a quarterback to really continue that process. But where was he by your senior year?
Yeah. And if I remember, he was going to come back, right? I mean, I think that was the plan. He was a junior. He was going to come back for his senior year. He had consistently gotten better and better. I think like the tape and the stats would play that out. But he got more and more comfortable with the offense. Well, I think 2 things happened. He got more comfortable, and the coaches understood who he was as a player more. So I think they could then build and create things that worked well for him and build the offense around him. So yeah, I think that over those years kind of was peaking. Now you would have had a lot of our senior class was leaving. So there was a lot to replace that next year, that ultimately Coach Fickle had to figure out and make his way through, especially when Terrell was going to be a crucial piece to that. But yeah, I mean, I guess you never know.
Yeah.
I think like it was his junior year was his best year. Senior year could have been in line with that, but so many other things were happening. They would have had to, there was a younger crop of receivers coming in. There was going to be new running backs coming in. Like our senior class was made up the bulk of that team. Brian Roll, Cam Hayward, those guys. But yeah, I guess we'll never know. That was a weird situation, and one seems in hindsight has a whole new color to it in today's world. But
well, tell me a little bit about what was it like to go through it leading up to the bowl game, because there was the whole like, oh, they're not going to be eligible, and then there's they already had the banner with Terrell's picture on it with Mitch Mustaine and all that, and it's like the bowl. It sounded like the Sugar Bowl basically said, no, we need these players, that kind of thing, and that was the Cam Newton year, by the way. Auburn won it, so he was dealing with his own stuff.
There you go. Yeah. We stayed out of it for the most part. I mean, I remember looking back and now I'm shocked at how little I knew or paid attention to the situation. Yeah, it was a weird one. It was a different era in college football. The other players, we were kept relatively in the dark. I didn't really know what was going on. I knew those guys, there was question about whether they'd be eligible or not. And who knows the shenanigans behind closed doors of whether they should or not. If the Sugar Bowl is like, no, you're not going to suspend the whole team, and like we're going to have a bad product out here. I'm sure there was pressure there.
That's what it sounded like to me.
Yeah. And then like basically saying, no, it doesn't count till next year. These guys can't play. It doesn't make any sense. It's a kind of a mess. I think the whole thing was kind of handled in a messy way. I know we internally, we had a senior meeting too, where it was like posed, and not that I don't even know if coaches would have even given it any weight, but like, should these guys play? Like, do you think they should play? And we're like, yeah, I do. I don't think we should go play Arkansas without them, if that's what you're asking. So, I mean, ultimately they did. It didn't feel like as big of a distraction as you would think. And I think we played as such. I mean, we came out firing in that first half. Like I said, we ran away with it to a point where like we almost relaxed too much.
Yeah.
So yeah, we stayed into this day. It's funny how little I still know about the situation, and I'm good friends with and host a radio show with DeVere. And it's just like, I don't know the specifics. I never asked. It didn't even really seem like my business. And I don't know. We just kind of let it play out as it was. And the media probably knew more about it than we did. We're just like, okay, are they playing? Or are they not? I mean, it didn't hurt anybody. Like, there's no really need to look at them sideways. Yeah, they probably shouldn't have done any of that because they knew it was illegal at the time. Yeah, you shouldn't have. But then again, like they're like your brothers at that time. These are your buddies. And it's like, okay, then are you in trouble? Are you grounded? Are you, did you get detention? Like it's something similar to that. It's like, we're not going to like stress about it too much. Everybody's healthy. And so, yeah, it was a media distraction, obviously cost Tressel his job and Terrell a bunch of money, and some of those other guys that would have had the opportunity to actually go in the normal draft.
Yeah.
So there was a huge amount of fallout, but it was kind of it felt for me personally, like in my wake, because I was a senior.
Yeah.
So we did our Sugar Bowl and I was on to, combine training, draft, what's next. And just kind of would catch glimpses of what was going on behind me every now and then. Like, well, they fired him? No way. Like, no. Oh, they.
Well, yeah, you were at that point. Yeah, at that point, you had other focuses. What?
Yeah, I was out of there.
Listen, we're going on and on here. I'm really enjoying it. I'm going to keep you for just a few more moments. You went 4-0 against that team up north. You blew them out 37-7 your senior year. In fact, you got the first touchdown of that game. Talk about the rivalry and becoming more a part of it than you had been as a kid growing up, and then also being from where you're from, how important that was to you.
Yeah, it was as big as anything for me and for those teams. And I think it is a different time now than it was then, because the incentives are different across college football. Mm-hmm. I think at that time, like I said, there was not an intense emphasis on winning a national championship across the board for every team. Now that pressure is always on Ohio State, and it's going to be there. But the traditions held up as much weight as those championships did. So, it was always, it was a big game. It was a huge, marker for any one of those years or through my career. It's like, you knew like this was going to be what happened that year. Okay. We ended up winning them all. So it's like you had those, but like those were like your hallmark. You're always going to remember that one. And being from Toledo, where there's a huge emphasis on it up there still. Mm-hmm. Even stranger. I mean, it was wild. The first time I was ever in that game wearing the uniforms and like seeing it with my own eyes, like on the field, it takes a minute. Like you got to get used to it. If you've been in it, you're like, whoa, this is like, I watched this every year as a kid, watching what was going to be the outcome. And now I have an impact on whatever that outcome is. So they weren't very good in those years. Frankly, if you looked at like there was a couple years that they won 3-4 games. So we didn't have the 1-2 matchup like the 06 team did. They were definitely in transition. We knew they would eventually be good again. That's just what happens. But yeah, that'll always be a big piece of my college experience was the, being a part of that rivalry because of the status that the game held and on some level still holds in Ohio and in Ohioans' lives, especially in Northwest Ohioans' lives. It's like, yeah, I'll always be like proud of being a part of that. And it almost on some level lives in its own space in my Ohio State career. It's like what you did at Ohio State and then the Ohio State Michigan games. They're obviously intertwined, but they almost live in their own silos just because it's a special game. It was just different. It didn't feel like an in-season game. It felt like something outside of the rest of them.
I get it.
So yeah, it'll always be special to me. Those are. I'm plenty happy that they were rebuilding at the time, and we were really hot at the time because those weren't all that competitive games, but they were just as sweet. And you get to take that with you. Now that I'm in my mid-30s, those are definitely cherished experiences.
That's awesome. Well, real quickly, take me through kind of what draft day was like and then going undrafted and then you signed with the Bears.
Terrible.
I was wondering about that because I'm sure you hope to be drafted, right? I mean, everyone wants to, but.
Yeah. You get your draft grades, and I was graded somewhere like 3rd to 6th round or 3rd to 7th. So yeah, I expected to be drafted. I agreed to do this thing at the time too. The Big Ten Network was having this path to the pros.
Mm-hmm.
They would follow you around. So they had 4 guys in the Big Ten that they were following through this process at all levels of it. So like J.J. Watt was the one who was like, okay, he's going to be a first rounder. And then it was me and a couple other guys, a guy from Penn State. So anyways, yeah, on draft day, I had this camera crew at my house. So I'm like, and it was just 2 days of it because it was like the whole second day. I'm like, we're going through. It's like, okay, probably not this early. It gets to the end. And then the whole third day, I was like, okay, certainly this is the day. And then you get to the end. And then it was the lockout. Like the lockout happened at the end. So it's like you went back into that and you still didn't know where you were going. So it was a bit, it was a little like, it's motivating on some level, but it was a shock to the system because it was like, man, that was starting all over, and then you got to go do it all again. It did make making the team in Chicago and then having a 4-year career all that sweeter, I will say. It was just that process was tough, but I mean, it is what it is. I get it. If you're going to take a shot in late rounds, if I'm a GM, typically how NFL teams tend to do it is like, who's got the highest upside? Basically, who's the best athlete we can get?
Sure.
And I think people knew what they were going to get with me. It was like a number 3 wide receiver. Maybe do a little bit on special teams, but probably not a whole lot. It's pretty specialized. So at this point, my older me now can look back and not harbor that much, but it was a stressful experience. But I think I made the most out of it when I was in when I finally got to Chicago and got to have a 4-year career, which I would have never thought would have been a thing. Again, growing up, not really having any of this on my radar.
Well, yeah, and you caught 27 passes for 276 yards, 3 touchdowns as a rookie. And then your second year, you go through the year with Chicago, but then it was kind of weird, right? Because they let you go right after Christmas, and all of a sudden, boom, you're with the Bengals, which that's my favorite team, by the way. So we were excited to have you.
Well, yeah, I was happy that somebody picked me up. Yeah, I got cut on Christmas Eve or day.
Yeah.
And then was in Cincinnati the next day. I drove down because they wanted me to beat like some storm that was coming in. Then was practicing the next day. That was like my first real welcome to like, you want this to be your career. This is how it works. But I really loved being back in Ohio too. Like it was a good shift I liked a lot of the guys I played with there, made some really good friends in Cincinnati. Yeah, it was a different point in my career where I kind of knew where I'd settled into like my role on an NFL roster. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was able to play a lot as a rookie, which again was in the right place, and some injuries happened and put myself in a position. Yeah, it was weird. The whole NFL experience, it was a whirlwind. It was, it's awesome, crazy, cool, stressful, all of those things. Yeah, I don't know. Looking back on it, I would have never been able to do it at the time, but I wish the draft and all that put such a bad taste in your mouth when really it's like, I don't think I ever took time to like really like enjoy what college was, what Ohio State was, what playing there was, or even after I was done, like looking back on like reflecting on it. There just wasn't time. Yep. Because you're always thinking about, even my senior year, where does this put me in the draft? Where does this put me in the next step? You have to have that mindset. But NFL as a whole, it was great. It's a cool experience. People are impressed by it. I'm glad it's on my resume, but it was relatively hollow compared to what Ohio State was.
Sure.
It's pro, and it's very much a business. It's just not the same thing. It's not the same thing at all as what like that experience at Ohio State was. And I had to get all the way out of the NFL and have years of distance to be able to look back and now move back to Columbus and understand and appreciate what that thing was.
Sure.
And reconnect and still have friends from the college group and what Ohio State provided. That an NFL team will never give you or provide. So I get to cherish it now. But yeah, that's why I think I talk about the NFL in that way now. It's just like, feels like Ohio State was the thing. And then the NFL was just like a series of like, yeah, it was cool. Made these plays. Yeah, it was fine. Went to this team. Yeah, it was cool. Made some money. Okay. Was done. And then, did I lose you?
No, we're here.
Okay. Yeah. And then you get back to real world, real life. You see what things actually had an impact on your life. Like
let me get you out of here on this, because as I said, I've kept you way longer than I said. I'm sorry, but who were some of your closest teammates at Ohio State? Like, your best friends. I know off air you talked about rooming with Brandon Sane. Tell me a little bit about one or two or three of your best friends from Ohio State.
Yeah. So Brandon Sane was my college roommate freshman year. We were roomed together. We lived together for the rest of our college, even off campus. I was the best man in his wedding. He was in mine. I'm godfather of his oldest child. He lives in Wisconsin. He's still one of my best friends. I still keep in touch. I mean, DeVere and I work together on some level on a radio show. Kurt Coleman, I'm still very close with when he comes back in town. There's like all of them, like Cam Hayward. I haven't seen him in years and years, but we'd be right back at it if he was in town and I ran into him. And that's just how it works. Chimdi Chekwa, Bryant Browning, Dexter Larimore, all these guys that still live in Columbus. Didn't even mention. I work with one of my really good friends and former teammates now. So, yeah, that's the family. I guess that's just like that's what it brings. And I hope that can somehow be retained in the new world of college football.
Yeah, I hope so too.
Obviously, I understand the moving around, and I do think you should try to maximize whatever benefit you can get from college football. But yeah, there's that piece that you're going to have to give up. And that's the one that like you only get when you hang your hat on one place.
Mhm.
Like Ohio State's all I'll ever, it's the only school I'll ever call home. You know, that's the one. And I think as a whole, I've been, my life has been very much benefited and enriched by that.
Well, I'll tell you this to let you go. The time I was a Buckeye fan for me throughout my years, I've always had, and it's never like one to the next, but it's like, hey, I identify that as one of my favorite players. You were my wife and my guy back then, so we were really excited. And like I
Thanks,
said, I was
Seth.
excited when you signed with the Bengals. My wife would get very excited when you caught a pass. That it's a lot of she'd scream out your name because she enjoyed saying your name so much. So, um,
Well, I'm flattered. Thank you.
but
That's
we had a lot of good memories watching you play football, and this hour plus, I've really enjoyed getting to know you a little bit. Thanks so much for taking some time.
yeah, no, I appreciate it. Anytime I can, it's been one of the cool parts of being back in Columbus too. It's humbling whenever people like recognize me or Jon Gruden gives a shout out
Yeah.
or even I run into people like yourself and they say like, "Oh yeah, you were one of my favorite." I'm like, "Yeah, I have to like remember, oh yeah, I did do that." That is
Yeah, no doubt.
that's great. That made an impact somewhere. So no, I appreciate you having me, man.
Well, thanks for turning into Buckeye Banter, everyone. Hit the like and subscribe buttons for Buckeye Huddle and all the content there on the site. And until next time, thanks for tuning in.